Michella Chester here for NCAA Digital. I am joined by Adam Kramer, a senior writer for Bleacher Report, college football, all things that. We're going to not bury the lead here, Adam. I want to talk about your top four, your CFP field for 2022, and the national champion pick. Let's go for it.
Okay, so my national champion pick, we got one right last year, which I also told you earlier in the offseason, so I think I'm beating a dead horse here. But pretty chalky this time around. I've got Ohio State, I've got Alabama, I've got Georgia, and I have Clemson. So when you look at it, these are familiar faces. These are teams that have made the playoff. To me, Ohio State and Alabama were pretty easy selections in a sport as random as college football. Easy, of course, is relative to the word, but I think Clemson and Georgia were a little bit more difficult. Clemson offensively just was not the team that we thought we were getting. Defensively is going to be really good. They had a lot of injuries last year. I think they're going to be a lot better, and they've got some options at quarterback. Georgia, of course, sent over a dozen players to the NFL, still has their national championship quarterback, has other options at quarterback, and is recruited so well that they can reload. This is a team that's kind of followed the Alabama blueprint. They can reload. Alabama and Ohio State, two elite quarterbacks. I think they're going to be elite defenses when this is all said and done. Great skill position players all over the place. I think it would be an epic matchup if we get them. And then for those that are probably not happy, maybe I left their teams out. A couple of teams that I really considered. Utah, for sure. They showed out in the Rose Bowl. I thought it was a really good showing, even though they lost. It's a team that showed that they had some firepower despite dealing with some injuries in that game. Texas A&M, maybe the toughest evaluation for me. In terms of overall talent, there's a ton of it, but a lot of it is young talent, and they've just found ways to lose games. They've also beat Alabama, by the way. So they showed that they can compete, but they found ways to lose games as well. I still think it's a year away, but those are two teams I wouldn't be shocked to make runs at the playoff.
So you going with Ohio State as your national champion pick?
I am. And it's really interesting because you look at C.J. Stroud last year where he didn't look comfortable all the time. Well, goodness, the seasoning is going to help, right? And I just think that this team has a chance to be incredibly special. Defensively, though, is where I think it gets really intriguing. You bring in Jim Knowles. They've recruited really well along the defensive side. The secondary has been kind of the issue, one of the pain points of the last couple of years after getting so many great secondary players to the NFL. I look at the schedule. I look at the talent. I look at the coach. I look at a team that's going to play with a little bit of an edge, too, after losing to Michigan finally, right? So I think Ohio State, to me, just makes a ton of sense. Sign me up for Ohio State, Alabama, if and when we get there.
How about some teams that we're not talking about that maybe we should be? What do you think there?
Yeah, Wisconsin is definitely that team for me, and I feel like we do this with Wisconsin a lot. They struggled early on last year, and then they found a true freshman running back who should have been a senior in high school, in Braylon Allen, who came in and really carried them. I watched him work out this offseason. It's the closest thing I've seen to Derrick Henry ever, if you can even say such a thing, because Derrick Henry was such a unique player. They're going to play great defense. They're going to run the ball. Can they get enough passing offense? I think they play on the right side of that conference, meaning, hey, if Ohio State wants to do all the things that I just said, they're going to have to go through Wisconsin. That's a team that I'm really intrigued with. And I got two more quick ones. West Virginia, JT Daniels, a player Georgia fans know really well, hopefully finally can play and stay healthy because I think there's a lot of talent there. It's a team that returns quite a bit. Full disclosure, was higher on West Virginia last year. It didn't exactly work out. I'm going to double down, and I think they're going to do well this year. And then a team, Miami. So we've got these teams, the Miamis, the Texases, the teams that for people like myself, you grew up and these teams were always good. I think Miami has a chance to be really good. Tyler Van Dyke's a really good quarterback. Mario Cristobal is a huge influence for them. Gaddis, the offensive coordinator from Michigan. Miami quietly closed out last year strong, and they're investing in the program. They've got good young players. That's a team that, again, buzz versus reality, what it's going to be, I think they actually have a chance to match up there.
All right, so in January when we talked, I asked you some very early Heisman candidates. You were pretty high on Will Anderson Jr. How are you feeling on that front now?
Well, I feel good, right? I feel very good about it. And I feel good about it because I think he's the best player in the sport. And I don't think there's any debate on that, quite honestly. I think he's that good. I think he's the best defensive player we've seen in the past decade. And you talk to people around the sport, they'd probably agree. In terms of impact, that's the kind of, the way he disrupts a game. The issue, however, is do voters see the same way, right? The Heisman is a quarterback-driven award. It's certainly an offensive-driven award. I am begging that a defensive player wins this award, and I don't see anyone more equipped to do it than Anderson. You look at the numbers last year, led the nation in sacks and tackles for loss. In some of those categories, it wasn't even close, and he plays off the ball a little bit. Obviously was in consideration to win the award. We saw Aiden Hutchinson of Michigan finish runner-up. I thought made a really press to actually do it. To do it, you're going to have to do one better. But I think ultimately he has a chance to do that. I'm excited to see what he can do because, again, in terms of overall talent, that part's not even in question.
Continuing from what we talked about in January, I asked you top storylines. You were very curious about the SEC, Brian Kelly taking over at LSU, a lot of things within that conference, obviously. That's still probably a really big storyline, but what else? Is there anything you want to add now that we're getting closer to season?
Yeah, part of the whole Brian Kelly, you had this week of madness in the sport, and the other part of that was Lincoln Riley leaving for USC. And I think now that you've seen what the roster is going to be for next year, I'm super intrigued to see just what the ceiling is for USC. Now, there's going to be very little rational discussion about USC. Let's be honest. They're going to overperform, they're going to underperform. I think it's going to be hard for them to overperform because the expectations are so high. This is a team that has really struggled to find itself consistently over the past decade. Now, you've got a great offensive coach. He knows the defensive coordinator. You have a great quarterback, young quarterback that's going to get better. You have one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver in college football, great wide receivers all over the place, and a great running back, and a schedule that is conducive to win a lot of games. So I'm trying to find the appropriate, catch myself in the hype, because you read about it, you process it, you say, oh, USC could be really good, but they won 4 games last year. The ingredients are there for a special season. Can they get past Utah? It's going to be a fascinating game. It's one of the most intriguing games on the calendar, but I have to check myself a little bit because I do think USC has a lot of the pieces you look for in a really good team.
All right, so you mentioned USC versus Utah. How about some out-of-conference games you're excited for? I feel like we've got a lot this year, Adam.
Oh, we do, and I do love this. The playoff has brought us the ability for teams to schedule up and to take some chances early on. We saw it with Georgia Clemson last year. Wasn't the best game, but it was certainly a huge game. And I think ultimately we're going to get huge performances and even better games. So, Texas versus Alabama, right, in week 2. These two teams have played each other in a national championship not terribly long ago. You've got the team that everybody is trying to be in Alabama, and Texas, the team that we are trying to proclaim back each and every time they win a football game. But there are pieces of evidence that say they're on the verge of being back. Recruiting obviously has been great. Quinn Ewers at quarterback. Bijan Robinson was one of the best running backs in the country. So I think it's a lot. It'll be a lot for Texas to have to compete with Alabama. But in terms of intrigue, and especially playing it at Texas, it's huge. Look, same for Notre Dame versus Ohio State. That is a tall order to have to play that team, that offense out of the gate. It's on campus. I just think, selfishly, that's what we want to see. The best part of this sport is just seeing the best go up, and there is nothing like a college football stadium, that kind of atmosphere. So we have other games. Georgia versus Oregon is super intriguing, given the connection with the former defensive coordinator and the new coach. But give me all these games on college campuses, and I will absolutely cherish each and every one.
All right, lastly, I'm going to end you on this, Adam. One bold take for the season. Last year didn't work out so well. Let's see how we do this year. You got the national champion, right? So
I did. 1 for 2 ain't bad. But so I don't know how bold this is because we just saw it. So this may not be bold, but I do think we're going to get 2 teams from the same conference in the playoff again. And I think that's the SEC, which is going to make some people happy, maybe some others not. Hey, that's the sport. That's the way it goes. But I think Alabama and Georgia are primed to do this thing again, even though Georgia, of course, is replacing a lot of its roster, could have a very similar season to what we saw Alabama do last year, which was replacing a ton of its roster there. So as we figure out the landscape of college football and what it's going to look like, to me, that aligns. I thought about, now this is the director's cut bold take. This is what did not make the final bold take. I think Houston, we talked about Cincinnati so much leading up into last season as a team that could crack the playoff, and they did. I'm not sure why Houston's not getting that same hype. I think Houston last year was really good, the majority went on a long winning streak in the middle part of that season. Can they do it again? It's tough. Even though the schedule is conducive for a lot of wins, I think Houston can at least flirt with that conversation once again about making the playoff.
All right. I love it. Adam, thank you so much. Excited for this season. Thanks for joining me.
Of course. Thank you.